5, 4, 3, 2.
Good evening, everybody. This is Jeff with Junior Hockey Advisor. Monday night, and it's been a busy week. Got a lot to talk about. We're going to focus tonight. We're going to focus on the process. A coach talks to you, a recruiter talks to you, a scout talks to you. What's the progression after that? What happens next? So it should be a good conversation. It should be fun. And stick around. Let's get rolling. All right, once again, I'm Jeff Colson with Junior Hockey Advisor. Been doing this for about 30 years. Been doing this podcast, this live stream, whatever you want to call it. I think we've been going for almost 2 years now. This was kind of spawned as a pandemic project that turned into literally now thousands of viewers on this, and we enjoy helping you out with your decision-making process. We're here not I'm not a family advisor. Actually, I do these webcasts, webinars, seminars, help people work through the ascension process. And what I mean by the process is, how do you get from youth to junior? How do you get to junior to college? We analyze and break down all kinds of pieces. If you haven't been with us before, I am a level 5 certified coach. Been a junior owner. I've been a coach at the junior level, at the NCAA college level. I've coached at all levels, actually. I have 2 kids that have gone through the process too. So kind of take it all together and put together a pragmatic process. I put my MBA hat on, and we break this down both statistically, pragmatically, and with a lot of common sense. So as we talk about these things and as we look at different issues, if you have any questions, please throw them up in the comments. We'd love to see your questions and see if we can help you out as the audience grows. We've just switched over to Monday nights over the last few weeks just because of my travel schedule and what I do. I do work for one North American Hockey League team as a director of player development. Kind of give you a little bit of breakdown of what a week looks like. I've been that seems to be something that people like to hear about is what do we do? Last week it started on a Tuesday night. Went out and watched the game an hour and a half away, talked to the coaches afterwards. I come back. The next morning, I spend my time putting all my notes back in the system. It was an 8 o'clock game. Didn't get home till well after midnight. Put all my notes in the system, reach back out to the coaches, thank them, ask them for more information on players. Then, this was a light week. Friday, during the day, I had a game to go down to in Mercyhurst, Pennsylvania, at the college. 1 o'clock game, I think it was. So I get up in the morning, 3.5 hour drive, watch the game, talk to players, talk to coaches, get back in the car, drive home, put my notes in the system. That's Friday. Saturday, it's all catch up on notes on players and texting people. Sunday, went right back down to Pennsylvania again, watched the game, met with players, and rinse and repeat. But this week, Monday, now we're getting into the season a little bit. Now what we start doing is, as I'm amassing players and I start identifying some talent that I like and that we think is good for the team, what we start doing is we start setting up conference calls. And then we start having conference calls, Zoom calls, I should say. And we meet with the parents and the player, and we go through the process of getting to know them, getting to know the player, laying out everything in our program, what we're about, what we do, how we do things, and kind of setting up for the next step. The next step is either a player-coach conversation where the coach gets introduced to the player, maybe even a Zoom call with the players, the coach, myself, or without me, depending on the situation, and potentially a visit where the player comes down, visits for a few days, gets a chance to see our rink, our locker room, our way of life, and then after that, then we start getting that list narrowed down after the visits, and then after visits, we get into choosing our master list of players for tenders and players for drafts. So from our perspective, what we're doing right now is we've got 6-8 people in the field. we've got our coaching staff, we've got our U18 staff, we've got our NA 3HL staff. Everybody's looking for players, everybody's building lists. One of my jobs is to compile that list and actually put together our master list and figure out which direction we're going to go with players. There's a lot of players out there. You're looking at prep players, you're looking at high school players from the bigger markets, the Minnesota markets in general for high school players. You're looking at U16, U18, primarily focused on the 18s. 03s and 04s are big for this next year. Then let's prep. Oh, and then we're also looking at other junior programs, other junior tier 3 junior programs or outlaw programs, meaning non-USA hockey programs. That phrase used to be used a lot more, but it's not used as much anymore, and I'm not sure why. So that's the process. My week really is very consistent. Watch games on the weekend for the most part, and then follow up with players, coaches, family advisors, and then eventually in the evenings having calls with players and their families to try to break this down. And the process, to be honest with you, doesn't change much at the college level. So when you move up to the college level, it's pretty much the same thing. Initial contact with usually an assistant coach watching you out in the field, get a phone call or two, get to know each other a little bit better. These days, the Zoom call kind of is the precursor to a non-campus visit. Zoom call goes well, everybody wants to move forward. Maybe you go to a non-campus visit, but the pandemic's kind of changed that a little bit. There's a ton of decisions being made without an actual visit, brick and mortar visit, and hopefully that's changed a little bit. If you're back to going on to college campuses and you're out there visiting, put that in the notes. I'd love to see if colleges are actually having you come visit. I know the junior programs are definitely having visits in person again. And then once you're on campus, sometimes people actually invite you to join the team during that visit. In other words, they wrap up the day long or the half day or the overnight, whatever visit style you're having. They have a final meeting with the head coach. They could present you an offer at that point, or they could say, we'll get back to you in a day, a week, a year, or whatever it is. So that's pretty much the process. And, at the level I'm at, which is not the highest, it's not the lowest, what we focus on is trying to get a list of probably 200 plus names that are eligible for tendering and drafting. And then we select our tenders out of that list, and then the draft comes outside of that. And the reason why it's two separate things is, remember, and why the list in the pool is so big is, remember, it's 29 teams deep inside of the North American Hockey League. So if there's 29 teams and they all draft once, if you only have a list of 50 or 100 kids, your list could go away in 2 rounds because that could be, you're almost at 60 kids once the first 2 rounds go. So you have to be prepared across the board with the assumption that a lot of players are going to be, that you have on the list, are the same players that other people have on their list too. Finding unique players is nice, but the reality is that we're all pretty much looking in the same places for players, and it's hard to hide if you're talent and you're usually playing in one of the better leagues. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. I'd love to see your questions, your comments on what we're doing, and that's basically what I want to do, is go through that process and talk about what I do, but then also turn it around and say, all right, let's look at it from your end. So what happens? Usually after a game, in my case, I usually reach out to a coach days in advance of going to watch them play, giving them plenty of heads up. Hey, I'm coming in. Who should I be looking at? From your opinion, who are the players? Now, you also have to have a trust in the coach that they're going to be honest. Some coaches out there at U18 that have a first-year U18 player may not give you their younger guys, even though they're their best players, because they want to see the older players move first. So knowing that U18 coach and building a rapport with that coach is important, because if I know the guy will never give me his younger players on the list, I know that going in. He's going to give me his older players, and he's going to tell me about their attributes, even though they might not be the best fit or the best talent on the team. So my job, I reach out to the coach. I have a conversation. I take notes on him. I do my due diligence on his roster. So for example, next weekend I'm going to Ohio for a Tier 1 Elite Showcase. I've already picked and selected the games I want to watch. I've gone through my notes to see if there's any players that have reached out to us that are playing in any of the games. And there's a few, there's not many, but there's a few kids that have reached out to us. I'll make sure that I get eyes on those kids because they reached out to us. That's, it's the common courtesy is if you reach out to a program, they usually come and watch you play a little bit. Fortunately, it's a good level tournament and there's going to be some good teams there. So I was already planning on watching most of the kids play anyway. Then, once I know what my schedule is, I talk to the coaches. I pull up elite prospects. I do homework off the team's websites. I try to find any information I can. There are websites, some programs put kids' phone numbers, parents' names. They give you a lot of information. I transcribe that right into my notes so that I have immediately the ability to talk to the family or talk to the kid with the information I got on the websites. So I put all that information together. I get ready to go. I go watch the games. And to be honest with you, if it's the first time I'm watching a team play, rarely am I going to the coach saying, hey, I really would like you to talk to this player. Now, it's also important from my perspective to know what the rules of the showcase or the tournament are. There are some showcases and tournaments that preclude advisors, recruiters, scouts, coaches from other programs to talk to the players until the last day. And the reason why they want the kids to stay focused and they don't want to get locker areas that, and part of it's just for timing. If I go down and there's 5 other guys there talking and the coach is bringing out guys for us to talk to, that process could take 10 minutes, it could take 45 minutes depending on how many kids and how many people are there to talk to kids. So if there's another locker room that needs to be used, or another team's got to get into that locker room for the next game in a showcase or a tournament, we're throwing the whole system off loop. So a lot of times, just to keep things smooth, a tournament or a showcase will say, don't go down to the locker rooms, and they'll ask you to either do it up in the lobby or just wait to the last day, which is perfectly fine. So if I do go over to the locker room, if it's the first time I've ever watched the team play, I'm usually just reintroducing myself to the coach. If I know the coach, I'm going over and saying hi and just chatting with him, chatting about the game for a minute or two after he's talked to his team in the locker room. And the reason why it can change so much, if I watch a team play once, I'm usually not seeing everything I want to see. There are teams that I've watched 4 or 5 times already this year, and I still am not settled on what I think is on the ice. Even though other teams, other junior programs, other colleges are ahead of me, I'm not really worried about that at this point. I'm worried about making sure we've got a solid selection and I really know that player inside and out. But let's say I have watched the team more than once, then I'm going to ask the coach if I really like a kid to call the kid out of the locker room. This is common for junior programs, common for college programs. A kid comes out and we introduce ourselves to the player and get to know him a little bit, say hi. And usually that first visit, it's just, hey, I wanted to make sure I introduced myself. I liked the way you played today. And there's not much deeper than that. Maybe exchanging phone numbers, maybe give him a business card, but it's very light. In that way, you want to see the response too. If you give him your information, does he send you a thank you? Does he ask questions? Does he follow up? You're looking for what kind of initiative and what kind of interest that's sparked from the player. That's important. It's a two-way street. Not only are they trying, or am I trying him on to see if he fits for our program, but he should be trying me on too to kind of see how I represent the program, and if he likes what he sees as far as what I represent. So that's that initial meeting. If I've already met with a player, I still want to go down and say hi, let him know I'm there. If I've already met with a player we like, I might even be texting him ahead of time and saying, hey, plan on being at your games this weekend. Good luck, and I'll say hi if I see are your parents going to be there. Anything I can do to move the process on with getting familiar with him, his family, and for him to get familiar with me as a representative of our team. So that's what happens during the showcase. Up in the showcase lounge lobby area for coaches, there's usually an area set aside for coaches, recruiters, scouts, college coaches. And in that room, then we're talking amongst ourselves about what's going on player-wise, I might ask coaches about players on their roster, but there's a lot of information that's being passed in that room. You're not just up there BSing, you're usually trying to do some work. You're reconnecting with coaches, introducing yourself to new coaches. There's always there's always new people coaching at the college levels, at the junior levels, at the U18, 16 levels. You can never be caught up on meeting new people and staying up with the game, even if you've been doing it a long time. That room's always got new faces in it, so it's always a good time to spend a little time up there. So let's go back a little bit and talk about what the players should be worried about or doing. First of all, being prepared for the weekend. What's one of the first things you can do to prepare? Not only are you doing what you have to do on the ice, physically and mentally getting yourself ready for the weekend, but at least a week ahead of time, if there's anybody you know that could potentially be there or that you think might be there, you should be shooting them an email saying, hey, I'm going to be playing at this showcase. So, for example, this is Columbus this weekend. It's the Tier 1 Elite League. If I'm a player in that Tier 1 Elite League, I want to send out an email to anybody that I think could potentially be there. So if I am really shooting to play in the EHL, if I'm really shooting to play in the NAL, if I'm really shooting to play in, let's say, the USHL, I want to email those programs and let them know, here's where I'm going to be this weekend. Here's my current information, my stats, my schedule, whatever the case may be. Look forward to seeing you if you're there. Okay. Only because, remember what I said earlier about my perspective. My perspective, if somebody's reached out to us, I'm going to actually take the time to try to watch that player play over the weekend. So if I'm a player, that's what I want to do before the weekend goes. When you're there at a showcase, when you're there on an away game, when you're there at a tournament, and there's a potential of somebody being in the building, you have to be on from the time you walk off the bus or your car until the time you get on the bus to leave for the weekend, or you get in your car with your mom and dad and leave for the weekend. You're on. Getting out of your car in a pair of shorts and your tank top and changing into your suit in the parking lot is not setting the tone that you're prepared for the weekend. And when you see a player do that, you kind of roll your eyes and go. If you see a kid chewing tobacco up in the lounge between games with French fries with cheese on him and his hat on backwards and his wife beater tank top all sweaty because he was too lazy to take a shower in between his two games in the showcase, you note that stuff. You know what team he's from, and if you don't, you go over and ask somebody. You go, hey, who's that kid with over there? We all do it. We all talk, and we all share information on things. So you want to be on. You want to be on the whole time you're there. There are so many positive things that could happen while you're in the rink. You hold the door for somebody. Maybe the person you're holding the door for is the guy that runs the Des Moines USHL team. You don't know. Maybe if you're standing in line and you see somebody struggling to walk their food back over to their table, reach out and say, hey, let me give you a hand with that. I'm not saying you're up there kissing butt to everybody, but being a good, polite person and being professional the whole time you're in the rink, it goes a ton further than doing the things that I mentioned earlier that aren't so good. So just be cognizant that you're always on and you're always being scrutinized, watched, observed in the rink, and that goes for parents too. Believe me, I just had this happen 2 weekends ago in Pittsburgh. I literally scratched a kid off the list on a team down at a showcase down there. And I'm not going to mention the team, not going to mention the age level, but I scratched the parent off. The parent was going nuts, and it was affecting the player on the ice, and it was affecting other parents, and it wasn't worth my while to think of even having a conversation with that player because of the parent that was attached to him. And that's at a higher level. That's still at 16 and 18. You'd think that stuff would start going away at that point. It doesn't. It doesn't. But there's people like me that note that stuff and, easily, without just a casual mark in the book, not worth my while, not worth my time. So you're on. Parents are on. Coaches are on. I have to be on. When I walk in the building, I'm shaved. I usually wear a sport coat or a nice jacket. I have slacks on because I'm on too. I'm being scrutinized by people. They're watching to see who I'm watching. They're seeing how I react to the game, to parents, to everything that's going on in the building too. So it is a place. There's a reason why they call these showcases, because teams are trying to showcase themselves. Even coaches in the stands, as we're doing our job, or recruiters, scouts are doing their jobs, we're being showcased too. We're showcasing what we're about, and we're trying to show our professionalism. So, tell me what you think. Throw your comments up there. If you have any questions about the whole process, I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but let's say hi to some people that are out there watching. We got Andy in Tennessee. We got Perry in Nassau. Good to see you, Perry. Lisa in Arizona. Brandon in Amherst, Mass. We've got Paul in Manorville, New York. We've got Julie in Long Island. We got Luis in Riverside. Once again, why are we, if we're in Riverside, California, it's probably still light out. It's a beautiful day. You probably have sunshine. Why aren't you on a surfboard? Why are you listening to me? We got Kyle in Nebraska. Tony's in Rockford, Illinois. Maria's in Newmarket, Maryland. We've got Sherry in Long Island. Jacob's on in Winston-Salem. Melissa's on in Brooklyn. Jeanette in Augusta, Maine. Sorry about that. Augusta. Yeah, that phonetics in my world. Stacy in Scottsville. Dan in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. Only second to Sheboygan, Michigan. Dana's in New Hampshire. And Luis said he's in LAX. So I would like to know what you're doing there. Oh, just flew in from Blaine, Minnesota. What'd you guys have up there? I think the PHL was up there this weekend, wasn't it? I think the PHL was up there. So we had some teams in Blaine. Tell me how that went, Luis. I'd like to know how everything went up there for your team. Rod's on from Northern Ontario. Good to see you, Rod. And not again. You're a friend of the program. You're here with us all as usual. So yeah, NAPHL was there. So all these showcases are getting rolling right now at all the different levels. Tell me what you think. What should your player be doing when they walk in the rink? What do you expect of your player? If you're a coach, if you're a recruiter, if you're a scout, if you're a parent, what are your expectations from the teams that are watching you in the stands? Do you interact at all with any of the coaches or scouts? Sure would like to know that. Ask questions away. Ask about the process. Tonight it's an open mic. It's an open night. It's an open question. I didn't have anything to talk about except kind of going through what my week looks like and what I do. Also having the time to explain both sides of it as far as how a regular weekend goes at these showcases. And if it's a really big showcase, for example, when the NAHL has their showcase in Blaine, they also have an NAPHL event very similar to the one that Luisa was just talking about up in Blaine, Minnesota. That's a big showcase for a lot of scouts and recruiters to be in the barn, because remember, every North American Hockey League team has to select for both for their tender process a player or one or two players for their tender process from that league. So we actually had 7 live bodies there, scouts, and we would distribute the games equally among us during the day, get together at night. Those are long days. You're not getting to sleep till 2 or 3 in the morning, because you're comparing notes afterwards and you're restructuring for the next day. You jump back at the rinks, you watch 6 or 7 games during the day, 5 or 6 if you're older like me, and then you're turning around, collecting all your notes, sitting down with the other staff, comparing notes, combining everything together, and then doing the same thing again. And it's important because you don't get a chance to see everything in the nation. Events like that, it's important for us because we have to actually pull 2 from that league, and that's how you get ahead of the game. You try to see as many players as you can and try to at least get an initial forced ranking of the talent that you can, as much as you can get your hands on. Impossible to watch every game, every player, but you sure try hard. You try to get as much as you can there. Okay, so we got some comments coming in. Luis, a bunch of talent from all over the country. Absolutely, that's why you're there. You're showcasing yourself, and those are good showcase events. What do you think as far as do you see or do you identify the people that are watching you? Luis, how many people were watching in the stands? I'd like to know if you had a lot of, I know the last NAPHL event in Blaine, there are games there at the U18 level where there are 20 or 30, mostly junior scouts, some D3 programs, very little D1 because the D1s would be over watching the juniors, the junior games that are going on at the same building at the same time. 8 rinks there, a lot of rinks if you haven't been up to Blaine before. So I'd like to hear that. Anybody else, any comments? Let me know. Once again, open mic right now. I'd like to know what direction to take the conversation in, and I really have little to discuss more than that, except for trying to help you understand the process, try to help you gain a little insight on how this all works. I had a great conversation with a parent today. Actually, had numerous parent conversations today, but we're actually recruiting a player that the mom and dad watch these broadcasts. They watch the live streams, and one of the things she asked was about D3 and where do D3 players when do you get recruited for D3? When does the D3 cycle start? And I know we've done this before, but I'm going to break that down. I'll put together a separate video on this. I'm going to talk about it a little now because it came up in a conversation today. But Division III coaches, for the most part, have no reason to look at U18. Division III coaches, for the most part, have no reason looking at first-year junior players, even North American Hockey League players. And you say, wow, there's a lot of talent there. Why wouldn't they reach out? Well, all things equal, you got a good player that's a first-year junior player or a guy that's in his age-out year, why would you take the younger player? Younger players are not fully developed as far as their muscular structure compared to a 21-year-old. I don't want an 18-year-old if I can have a 21-year-old body. Who's going to be more mature around alcohol, girls, and any other problems that can arise for a college coach, an 18-year-old or a 21-year-old? Well, you would think, and in most cases it's very true. In fact, the vast majority of players that are older have already gone through that phase of having to experiment or to test themselves out and have settled into more of a path of wanting to learn, wanting to get better, and are ready to embrace adult things at the age of 21 versus, no, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying every 21-year-old is mature, but compare that to the 18-year-old. So the answer is virtually across the board, your college programs at the D3 level will wait and only look at the oldest players coming out of juniors because they can. Now, it's not always true with the D1 programs because there are so many great players that are NHL level players. So you start seeing kids that'll play 1 year of college and boom, they're off to pros. Those guys are also coming right out of the National Development Program at 17, going to college at 18. They're coming right out of 1 year in the USHL, jump into a D1 program, playing their 1 year, and then they're out the door too. So, take away those guys. For the most part, the rest of the colleges want to see players that are playing out or playing at least 2 years of juniors before they select them. It's not as hard, fast of a rule, and it's nowhere near as high of a percentage of players as D3, but it is the wanted outcome. Try to get the more mature players on your program. So we've got a couple questions coming in. Let's jump into see some things coming on here. So a question comes in: do scouts look at teams even if they are losing all their games? Yeah. In fact, this last weekend, I came to watch the more powerful team. I came to watch the team that was the highest ranked U18 team that I'd watched all year long. They played a team that was much further down in the rankings than them, and but there was 2 or 3 players that really stood out. One in particular. So I actually called the coach today, had a long conversation, got the contact information, and be reaching out to that player on the team that's not so good. Now, I got to be completely candid on this. If I'm at a tournament or I'm at a showcase and let's say there's 10 teams there, and the ninth team, as far as the strength of the overall picture, is playing the 10th, I'm probably not going to go watch that game. But if nine's playing 4, and I already knew I was going to go watch 4, of course I'll watch 9 too. If 10 is playing 2, I'll watch that game too. Now, it's always better to watch 1 play 2, it's 1 play 3, 2 play 4, because you're getting competitive, you're getting strength on strength. But absolutely, they'll be watched if the scenario plays out. I'm not sitting on my schedule for this next weekend going, who's going to be there. St. Louis is going to be there. I think St. Louis is ranked as one of the top teams in the nation right now. They're going to be there. Of course, I'm going to watch St. Louis, and I'm going to use that as my benchmark for players for the rest of the weekend. I'm not going and saying, who is the 130th ranked team? By gosh, let's get to that game first. So there's a little bit of common sense with that. Now, if I walk by a rink and something catches my eye, or if I got time, I'll watch 9 play 10. But it's not the highest priority. You're usually looking for the fast movers and shakers. And remember, it's not a steadfast rule, but a team that usually, if a team ranks out somewhere between 100 and 125, there's a good chance that team's always been in that rank, the 100 to 125. It could be coaching, it could be proximity to major markets, it could be a team that's just moved into the tier 1 ranks. There's a lot of reasons for that team to be there, but the ranking usually is indicative to the amount of talent on the team, and it really is not my world to look and look for a diamond in the rough. I'm looking for players that are ready to go. And one of the things that most of us that do this is, could he step into the lineup now? Do I have a guy that's ready to step in the lineup now? Of course, not every player is there, but we're not looking at guys and seeing if we brush him up and clean him up and put a little wax on the outer carriage there and shine it up a little bit, he'll be fine. We're looking for him to see if he's got skills that are as good or better than what we have right now. And if you think about other sports, college football, college basketball, even college hockey, a lot of times the programs that bring in freshmen, the freshmen play right away because the team's always trying to find the best talents out there. And if you find the best talent out there, you're trying to get them playing right away. And you see that in football. You get a 5-star recruit, he's playing. You got somebody coming out of Alabama and goes to the NFL. There's a good chance that rookie's playing if he's coming out of Alabama. And we've seen that this last weekend. We saw Alabama against Alabama and some really good football games yesterday if you're a football fan. But anyway, I digress. Let's jump on and see what that's a great question. Thank you, Lisa, for that question. Louis says there are not as many as the showcase last month. 2 to 3 watching at the U16 levels. That's about right. Still good to get some people there. It's a small hockey community when playing at that level. Absolutely good to see. Hey, I saw Greg jump on from Amherstburg, Ontario. If you don't know where that is, you cross the bridge out of Detroit, you turn right, drive down a little bit, you'll run into it. Good to see you on the line, Greg. If we don't have any more questions, let me just jump on some of the other social media platforms and see if some questions are coming in from some other areas. And just check before I jump off. And like I said, not looking to stay on long here. Okay, here's a long one, but okay, here's a question about interaction, and I will gladly jump into the interaction. It's a longer question, but I'll jump into some different parts. And since it was DM'd to me, if you never want your name used, just DM me and the question, and I won't use it. If you're putting the question out there on our comment board, clearly you've already put your name out there. I'll usually attach the name to the question. But for people that are that don't want, for whatever reason, their name to be attached, DM me the question. I'll read the question, or I'll paraphrase the question and see if I can help the rest of the group with your question too. I've always tried to keep as a parent, minimal interaction with the coaches other than cordial greetings, handshakes, etc., to allow the player to advocate for themselves, and all communication between player and coaches not to become that parent. Okay, so I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit and shorten this out. Additionally, with the representation the last 18 months, not much need for communication as the professional advisor is dealing with direct with the head coach. I'm not sure what is normal for a parent or what they should be doing with interaction. Guidance would be greatly appreciated. So what the question is, hey, look, my kid's playing. He's getting some attention from different scouts, recruiters, coaches. They're talking to my kid. I might reach out, shake hands, introduce myself, but I leave it at that. The interaction should be between the, or my perception of that is the interaction should be between the player and the coach. That's absolutely true. A good person in this industry is trying to involve you to set the ground rules of when you'll be talking to the player, especially if they're under the age of 18, and to be honest with you, even after the age of 18. I bring in the parent, for example, like I said, just met some players for the first time over the weekend, and I laid out the guidelines, or laid out the timeline, not the guidelines. Hey, look, we had a great conversation. We're going to now reach out. Let's set up a Zoom. We'll have a Zoom between you, your parents, and I. We'll lay out the progression of how we recruit, what our program's about, and also be available for any questions your parents will have. Then your parents can also hear, what my expectations are of you, and you can set the expectations of me. Meaning, hey, look, we don't text us after 10 o'clock. Our son needs to study. Hey, we prefer that anytime he interacts with you, we're involved. Now, I don't get that much, but it does come up once in a while where a parent wants to be involved in any interaction, and I get it. It's I wish there was more rigidness at the junior level with our interaction piece, because at any other level, an adult can't be in a locker room with a kid by himself. An adult can't be in certain situations at the U18, U16 level without multiple people around. But you get to the junior level, there's a lot of times where I honestly feel more comfortable when a parent's around or when a parent's interacting, just because there's more eyes on the situation and nothing can be misconstrued, nothing can be taken out of context. So usually it doesn't bother me when a parent's involved. However, the further down the line you get, knowing to set the tone but then back off a little bit is fine. In other words, if one of the parents today on the Zoom calls that I had with parents and the players would have said, hey, do you mind if any interaction going forward that we're involved, that's perfectly fine. Some parents might temper it through their advisor, saying, hey, can you reach out to advisor and keep him in the loop, or maybe even get him on a Zoom call too? That's fine. Those are all appropriate. I wouldn't sit down next to a scout or recruiter or a coach in the stands if they're watching a game. If I was a parent, that between periods, walking up, introducing yourself is perfectly fine. Once that identification is made, if that coach wants to, that recruiter, a person like myself in the stands, now I know who you are. If I want to reach out, now I had a parent do that with me on Friday. They came up and introduced myself. Actually, a couple different parents came up and introduced themselves. And when I walked back in the rink on Sunday, I wasn't there Saturday, I came back in the rink on Sunday, I made sure that I gave him a wave, how you doing? Hey, your son had a great game last game, or I saw your son play, keep up the good work. Even if it was just in passing, I'm making sure that I acknowledge them. Now they know there's a connection there. And I've even said from time to time, hey, look, I know where you're at, I know who you are. If I need you, I'll come over and ask you questions. Thank you very much. I'll probably be reaching out, or my plan is to reach out to your son this week and chat with him, or to text him or follow up. So that's usually the way it works. I don't think you need to be calling coaches directly, calling recruiters, calling scouts. If you're a parent, that's probably not the appropriate way to handle it. But if you know 4 or 5 junior programs you're in the stands and you have an advisor, hey, jump in with your advisor. I know for a fact that a parent this weekend called their advisor when they knew that we were in the building, I was in the building, and the advisor reached out to me and asked me what I thought about his player. So it's perfectly okay if you're using an advisor to have that advisor reach out. But as a parent, I highly doubt it's a good idea for you to make a phone call. Now, after a weekend, if you didn't have any interaction with a junior program that you knew was in the building, or you saw a couple of your teammates get some conversations, write a follow-up email from the player. And that kind of follow-up email should be a situation like, hey, coach, I saw you in the building. I would have loved to have been able to meet you. By the way, can you give me any idea of what you think of my game, or could you give me any suggestions or any feedback on how I play? That's a perfectly acceptable email. Might not always get responded to, but there's a good chance that if that guy was in watching your team, he's going to give you some feedback, because he wants to stay in good stead with that team. He wants to have a good relationship with the coach, wants to have a good relationship with the players, because it's only going to feed for the future. So, okay, let's see what else we got going on here. See what other comments are coming in. As a scout, is scoring the most important area you look for, or a sense for the game? Well, that's a great question. So, at the end of the weekend, this weekend, I watched 2 of the 3 teams that played. Did not even look at the statistical sheet until Monday, when I was like, oh, so who got the points? No, yeah, believe me, there are guys that put scored, and write those right down in the notes. And once in a while, if a kid does something highlight reel, I write it down as far as scoring the goals. Now, there are a lot of times that the goal only got scored because of what the player or the 2 players before that player, the plays they made that equated to a goal that was scored. So a lot of times, there's something you'll hear this talked about. If you've really been doing this and you've been doing this a long time, you can literally shoot a puck next to my head in the game and I won't flinch. And why is that? Or why is a guy that's been doing this a long time? Because we're not watching the puck. We're not paying attention to where the puck is, or where it's specifically doing. We know in general where that puck's at, but I'm watching 3 or 4 other players. I'm watching the bigger picture. Oh, wow, did you see that? That guy did this. Oh, he picked up his man. And I'm watching to see the progression of plays, knowing what the puck's going to do. Usually, 95% of the time, I know what the puck's doing, even though I'm not watching the puck carrier. Now, there are times when I want to watch the puck carrier because that's the guy that I'm looking at. A lot of times that's not the case. In fact, the majority of the time, I'm watching the rest of the ice. There are other times where I'm only watching the bench because I want to see how that player reacted after he just was on the ice for 2 goals against. I'm watching to see his interaction with a coach because he made a mistake on the ice, and how he's responding when the coach gives him some feedback. Is he slumping his shoulders? Is he? And that's another reason why a lot of times I don't sit where the bench can see me. I'm sitting off to the side or to the back, if available in the rink, where the players don't know where I'm sitting. So if they do recognize me, they're not concerned about having a scout or a recruiter in the stands. So a lot of times in this situation, no, I don't pay attention to the amount of goals. I note the goals I see scored. I note, hey, scored goal. But you could score 5 goals and not be anywhere near the top of the list of the guys that I'm looking for. Maybe if you're scoring 5 goals, maybe you move your way up to the top of the list. But hope that helps a little bit. Let's see what else we got here. Garrett S., good evening. Will you get an opportunity to watch Minnesota high school games this season in person? Thank you. Yes, but we also have 2 people in Minnesota that also are from Lone Star that will be watching too, which is very common. You'll see a lot of, realize when I walk into Minnesota, since I know Tier 1 elite, I know 16s and 18s, I know that inside and out, backwards, forwards. I know the coaches, I know the programs, I know the players' progression through the system, how they work. You get me up into Minnesota, yes, I know what a good hockey player looks like on the ice, but I don't have the relationships with the Minnesota coaches. So we rely on people in that market that live in Minnesota. Minnesota is its own world, just like in the prep world. Yeah, I know most of the prep situations. I know the good prep programs. I know a lot of the coaches. But, it's so much better to have somebody on boots on ground that's just immersed in prep to give you good feedback on the prep situations that are out there. The majority of what I personally do is other junior leagues and 16s, 18s, but I will be watching. I think I'm in Minnesota twice, watching Minnesota high school, and it's usually to reaffirm what we already know, or it's to start the interactive process with players. But yes, absolutely, we do reach out on that. So Perry asked, what do scouts look for on the ice? I think every scout looks at the world a little bit differently, but there's so many things you're looking for, and it also is flavored by what type of coach you have in your program. If I know my coach is all about speed and less about physicality, I'm looking for speedy players regardless if they play physical in the corners. If I know my head coach is all about physicality, well, then I'm looking for a player that, not size-wise, but physical. So a lot of this has to do program to program. Some programs want big, they only want big, and they work down from big. It used to be that in the National Training and Development Program, if you weren't 6'1" or 6'2" or 6'3", they weren't opening the door for you. Those days have changed, and it changes by who's running the National Development Program at the time. Who's the coach? What type of player they're recruiting into the program? Used to be you had to be huge. Not so much anymore. The program's taking a turn towards skilled, speed players, but that changes. So to say what they're looking for, I can tell you what I look for. I want a completely all-dimension player. I want a kid that can skate very well. Size isn't important, but physicality is very important. I want a player that anticipates on the ice and sees the ice well. You hear about hockey IQ all the time. Hockey IQ, and people say you can't teach hockey IQ. Hockey IQ, to an extent, is what you can do within the constraints that the coaching staff has put on you. Constraints are systems, and how far you push the edges to be creative inside of that system, and where you can anticipate what's going to happen. You see all the time in football, great programs with great systems, and you got a safety that gets 5 interceptions because he anticipates where the ball goes because he knows the game so well. So you look for that. That's that hockey IQ side, but usually that hockey IQ is because the player either knows himself and is confident, knows the system so well, knows where he can cheat, knows where he can do things to make a jump early, make a hit early, make a pass into an open space, knowing he's got a teammate that's going to be filling that space. There's so many things like that that give you that hockey IQ. You got to be a good skater. You got to be able to handle the puck. You got to be able to play physical. Those are things you look for. But it's so tough to say what each individual program's looking for because everybody constructs their team differently. I've had coaches that have worked for me when I was a general manager that literally said, I want every left-hander, left winger to be left-handed. I want every right-hander to be right-handed. And I've got 4 centers. I want 2 left and 2 right. We've got 8D in the program. I want 4 left, 4 right. And they work backwards from there, which to me is just completely foreign in my mind because I look for talent first. And then I worry about what hand the stick is. And then sometimes, I've had teams with the majority of kids left-handed, and it doesn't bother me a bit. I've had teams with majority of kids right-handed. But there are different coaches look at things differently. Some coaches, have height requirements. Either mostly, they want a kid to be so tall. But there's other programs that say he's too big, he's too gangly, that doesn't fit for us. And it's a perfectly legitimate player that they're turning their back on because they think that he looks awkward on the ice. So I don't think I could pigeonhole, except for the fact that you'll hear phrases used by coaches, scouts, recruiters, coaches, things like good hockey IQ. You'll hear another phrase used a lot of time where he's got a little FU in his game. I won't use the actual phrase. And what that means is that he's got a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. He's not going to back down from anything. Coaches like those kind of things. They like a kid that's rigid, meaning he's not going to back down from anything in the corner. He's not going to back down after a whistle. Those things are essential to most coaches. So skating, heads up hockey play, being able to move the puck properly, and understanding the game and coachability. Of course, that's always a big one. Can you be coachable? Because to be honest with you, you don't last long if you're a pond hockey player unless you're world class and your name's Hughes. Then you can get all the way through college with just to pick up the puck and go, and whatever system that a team has, it's going to get adjusted to your system because that's the way the oldest Hughes brother plays. At least he played up into the NHL, and a little bit of the same way in the NHL. But he also has the ability to skate around everybody on the ice, so he can get away with that. Most of us can't. Most even great D1 players can't do what he does, so they can't do that. So the bottom line is it changes a little bit, but I hope that gives you a little bit of advice on what people are looking for on the ice. So the couple more things coming in. Let's see what I can get to. James asks, if a scout comes to watch a specific player and they have a bad game, does that hold a lot of weight on the future decisions, or is it a bigger picture type decision? So I would say in most cases, James, it's a bigger picture type situation. There were definitely kids that weren't on their A game over the weekend. Earlier in the year, there was one player in specific where the coach literally told me, hey, he was questionable coming into the game. He had a stomach flu, or he had a stomach, might have been something he ate, but it was last night in the hotel room. The kid was vomiting all night long, but he cleared it up for the most part. We knew he probably wasn't going to be at 100%, and I take that into account myself. Most coaches will, and you ask the coach after a game, hey, what did you think about his game today? And the coach will tell you, hey, look, that was a C-. He's usually A-, A player. But that was a C-, and it just wasn't going his way. It doesn't mean they're going to make excuses, but they'll. Most coaches will help you to figure out if a kid you came to watch, where they're at in their game and how well they played that day. So that's a great question. Is it going to be the end of it all? Well, sometimes there's nothing I can do about it if I'm only going to come watch a kid once and I won't see him again for 2 or 3 months. If he didn't have a good game, remember, there's hundreds of players out there. It's kind of like a job interview sometimes, and I hate to say it, but you don't usually get a redo on your job interview. You can't call the guy you were interviewing up or the woman you were interviewing up and going, hey, I didn't do a good job. Can I do that again? So that's where the consistency factor comes in. Yes, we can give a kid a pass if we know that there was some kind of situation. Hey, he had 3 major exams earlier in the day. Probably not going to be at his best today because he's been in the books for the last 3 days, and his stress level was through the roof. Yeah, you can take those things into account, but in juniors in college, there's always those stress points too, especially when you get up to the college level where you're going to have midterms, you're going to have finals, you're going to have papers due, you're going to have to find a way to play through those things. So, yeah, it can hold weight on it, but for the most part, at least me personally, I try to factor that stuff in, and because I try to, some coaches come in and it's either up or down the first time they see him if the kid progresses through the line. I don't like him, they're done. They won't come back and watch him. I try to tend to watch a kid several times before I make a judgment on him. But if I watched him 3 times and the coach keeps saying, oh, that's his C game, he's got an A game, it's probably lights out for that player after 2 or 3 games. So hopefully that helps. So Perry asks, does it change year to year? How do you know what programs are looking for? Perry, it absolutely changes year to year on what teams are looking for. For example, let's start at the college level. Colleges, because there's a push down with the pandemic, and what I mean by push down is, everybody got a free year back last year. The NCAA came out and said, you get a pass on this year as far as eligibility. If you want to come back, you can play. So you got all these seniors and juniors that would normally not be there that are filling those spots. Well, that gives a coach a chance on the bottom end this last year to go after higher talent, to go after more skilled players, to go after something that was probably unique that they normally wouldn't go for. Other programs ran out, and this really happened at the high level, cream de la cream D3 programs. They saw this pushback with all these players, and they reached out for a bigger basket of players. So in other words, if I'm at D3 school, I'm a top 10 D3 school, and I see, So there's not much room at the D1 level because all this pushback, the portal, all these transfers, these players all get a year back. You know what? I'm going to push harder to bring in the talent of these kids that did not make these D1 rosters that would normally make it. So maybe that program really only needed 4 or 5 players. They brought in 10. What are they going to do? Well, they're probably going to take away some sophomores and juniors this next year because they've got this huge amount of new talent coming in. That won't be there the year after next, most likely. So they went out and grabbed it. So yes, every year it changes. The 04 overall macro pitcher class is not the same as the 03, which is not the same as the 02s. Every year those class sizes are different sizes. The talent pool is different. The national camp, as far as the amount of kids that are being pulled into commitments coming out of national camps are different. And you also see, very simple to see on what the draft list looks like coming out of our national training and development program. You know, if there's only one kid getting drafted in the first round off the national training team, the national team, either the 18s, there's the 17s and 18s. Well, that makes it very clear that that's weaker than any of the other years prior to that. I'm not saying that's the case right now because they're pretty strong across the board. So yes, every year changes. Do teams change? Yes, teams change. If I know our team is going to be veteran laden next year and we're going to have 15 players that are returning and they're all, just incredibly good, I might go real young and try to bring in the youngest players I can, because then I can look at 3-year players to build with those young guys because we've got really strong veterans that are returning. If I know we're not returning many veterans, then I'm probably going to spend more time watching juniors and try to pull in some veterans from either the Canadian Junior Leagues, the NCDC, other places like that. Now when I say I'm talking about the proverbial junior level, generic. I'm not speaking about my role with Lone Star here, because I'm trying to give it more of a generic, this is what coaches look for and how they work. So yes, it can absolutely change from year to year. It does change from year to year. Of course, every team has a template of what they like and what they'd like to put into play, but injuries happen. Kids leave earlier. Kids drop down from colleges and from the USHL. Things are always changing. So actually, the best way to look at it is chaos manages. If you manage chaos well, chaos manages the situation. So you don't want it to take over. You want to manage it. So the better you are at being, to keep 8 plates spinning at the same time on sticks, the better off you're going to be in trying to build teams at this level. So hopefully that helps a little bit. How many scouts does a typical NA team have watching goalies at any given time? Steve, that's a great question. There is no direct answer to that. Most NA programs have a goalie-specific scout that they try to route everything to. I know in our situation, our coaching staff, general manager, all of our scouts, and our goalie-specific person all look at goalies throughout the year. We try to funnel the technical side of things to make sure, hey, can you watch this kid? Can you watch this video? To make sure that we're not missing anything technically sound to our goalie expert. And then the ultimate decision goes to the head coach, general manager in most NA programs, because just like any other player, coachability, personality, work ethic, all the things that have nothing to do with the technical side of the game have to still be vetted and also fit the bill for whatever team that's trying to recruit a player. I don't think there's many programs out there that have more than a couple. 1 or 2 are usually the case for people in the field that are looking for goalies. But what happens a lot of times is a goalie person works summer camps with other goalie instructors. A goalie person runs their own goalie camp, so they have a lot of people that work for them at their goalie camps. So a lot of goalie peoples are so connected with other goalie people that they kind of build their own network inside the goalie community. So if you got a goalie person that runs their own goalie camp or works a lot of other goalie camps or attends a lot of national USA hockey things in some kind of leadership role with those goalie camps, they've got a pretty darn good network. So they're on the phone talking to these other people, and if they're not seeing a person live, they're like, hey, what do you think about this kid? Or, hey, have you got a chance to see anything in your market? Or, who's hot right now? What kids do you like? And so they're honestly, there's a pretty pure network in most teams with their goalie coaches and their goalie staff, so they can get good looks on kids. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Should a kid doing real well in NAPHL look to move cities to a team in the Tier 1 Elite? Andrew, that's a great question. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the NAPHL, but the NAPHL is loaded. One or two, sometimes three teams, top heavy with talent. The rest of the teams come off of that, and all you have to do is go to the go and look on online at the My Hockey rankings. You can pick up the NAPHL teams that are loaded, and there's a couple of them. Now, the answer is it doesn't matter what league you're in. The answer is always, if you can ascend to a higher level league, statistically, where do the most of the players in the NAHL come from? Come from Tier 1 Elite as far as 16s and 18s. Where do most of the players that are coming out of 16 and 18 leagues in the USHL come from? They come from Tier 1 Elite. Now, do they come from every Tier 1 Elite team? No. There's Tier 1 Elite teams that absolutely won't have a player move on. So it's still trying to play for the best team in that league. Now, if you're playing for the best team in the NAPHL, you probably don't have a problem. You probably don't need to move on. If you're playing for one of the top three teams, or if you're playing with a team that has a super relationship with the North American Hockey League team, and they tell you, hey, look, stay right here, you're on pace, and we like you, and there's a conversation there, well, maybe that's different. But for the most part, it doesn't matter what, U16, U18 league, you're always trying to aspire to excuse me, to a higher league, excuse me. And I would say that it's case by case, and not every shoe fits every foot here. But if it were me, I'm always trying to ascend to the best league, best team, only because it's statistically to your advantage that the majority of players come out of the Tier 1 Elite League to go to the North American Hockey League. It's pure fact. Even with two players that get to be tendered to each team from the NAPHL, if there's only two or three teams that have, that are really super strong in the NAPHL, and there's 29 teams in the NAHL, there's not enough players on those two or three teams to fulfill the needs. So they all, and not even if you're a great team at the NAPHL level, the bottom 3 or 4 players are not going to get tendered. Maybe the bottom 5 players, bottom 10, even if you're the number 1 team in the nation. It just doesn't happen that way. So the odds are, even if you're on the best team, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a tender. And remember, the tender process is not statistically 100% of the players that get tendered make the roster. You just have to work back on each individual NAHL team and look at what the history of their players are. If you see that they normally have a player from the NAPHL on their roster, 1 or 2, maybe the odds are that if you're aligned with him, it's good. But across the board, I would always shoot to play in the top league if at all possible. Thanks for that question, Andrew. That was a great question. I appreciate it. Let's go to some of the other social media platforms and also look in the back door to see if we have anybody that's DMing any questions that want to get them on. I think we've been on for an hour. I think I'm going to wrap it up unless there's one last second question that comes in. I hope I helped you a little bit tonight. I hope I kind of give you a little bit of a feeling. James Weaver, I saw this comment. The Jacks are back. Yeah. He's speaking of Odessa and the Jackalopes, who are having an extremely good year in the South right now. That's an NA. I was going to call them an NA 3AHL team. They're an NAHL team. My son actually played for them. Lived with the Weavers, one of the best billet families you could ever imagine having your kids involved with. Get in line if your kid's going to play in Odessa, because that's the place you want to live. That's if your common sense if you believe in work ethic. The only thing wrong with the Weavers are they ride one of those three-wheel motorcycles instead of riding a real womanly or manly two-wheel bike. That's my only contention with the Weaver family. But yes, the Jacks are back. Yes, they're up there in the top of the league right now. But don't forget, last year at this time, Odessa was, they came out of the first weekend out of the showcase, and they were actually undefeated. I think they went 3-0 right off the batter. They were up there, and they looked like they were going to have a good year and start off the year right, and then things changed. I would not count your chickens before your eggs, or not count your eggs before your chicken, whatever that is. I wouldn't do that yet. But congratulations to their great start and the great run they're having right now. Everybody, thank you so much for being on board tonight. We had a good crowd. Remember, I'll put this on archive. If you got friends, you have family that you think this would be valuable for, have them look at it. DM me any questions you have. Don't forget to look at our YouTube page. We got great videos on there too, Junior Hockey Advisor. Like and follow us on YouTube. Like and follow us. If you're not part of our discussion group, jump onto the discussion group at Junior Hockey Advisor on Facebook. The group is going crazy again. For whatever reason, the last 2 weeks, we're getting just huge numbers of people joining the group again. So we're on a little bit of a tear on growing that group. Other media platforms out there, keep following us, keep liking us, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for being a part of the family tonight. Appreciate it.